a narrative that I've seen brought up a couple of times in regards to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I do think it needs to be brought up because it really just goes to show you the insane lengths that some people will go to in order to downplay what Nintendo is doing, right? The kind of crazy things people will do and say to try and gaslight you into thinking that Nintendo's not on top of their game, that they can't win the industry, and that they're not going to be able to compete going forward. It's kind of insane, like the kind of things people come up with. I've talked about the whole censorship debacle, right? How people fabricated this narrative that Nintendo aggressively censors games on their platform. I've talked about the narrative that Nintendo mistreats third-party developers. They don't, I talked about all sorts of things, but one of the weird ones, and this is legit one of the most fringe autistic things I think I've seen in years, is the whole game engine thing. There is a pervasive belief among certain people in gaming, online gaming message boards, is that it is completely impossible to run gaming engines designed for PS5 and Xbox Series X on Nintendo Switch. So Unreal, which is supposed to be compatible with everything, is simply too advanced of an engine to run on Nintendo consoles. It can't happen. Never mind that there are games running Unreal Engine 5 on Switch. Oh no, it's just some heavily modified special version that can never be used to put other games on the platform. It's such a cope, right? This is the kind of thing you hear people say whenever the subject of why third parties don't support Nintendo consoles, right? The real reason is because they want to, they can't compete on that hardware and they have to prop up PlayStation and Xbox. But the conspiracy is that Nintendo is so underpowered that developers can't possibly put their games on their hardware. So it would accumulate too much resources, man. We can't support the market leader. These engines, they're just too powerful. They're just too amazing. This is and always has been a cope. Okay, this is just a complete blatant lie that I'm sure has its roots back in the Wii days or maybe even the GameCube days. You see people claim that the GameCube didn't get games because of the disc sizes all the time. Just like you see people claim that third parties didn't support N64 because of the carts. Okay, it's a complete and total cope as to what actually happened is that PlayStation was paying these developers for support, but to not support Nintendo, right? Actively incentivizing them. Even now, Tekken doesn't come out on Nintendo consoles, even though that's where the audience is. Right, Harada's outright admitted this, is that he avoids Nintendo releases because Sony would get upset with him, right? So again, this is the reality of the situation is that these engines aren't ported, these games aren't ported over because of Sony's control over the industry, right? It has nothing to do with the engines and its supposed incompatibility with Nintendo software. If that was true, they would just design the engines to be compatible with Nintendo, right? There's nothing stopping them from design. Again, I've always said this, if there really was a compatibility issue with Nintendo consoles, all they would have to do is just design the game with Nintendo consoles first and then port it to other consoles later. But they never seem to do that. It never seems to cross their mind. They have no problems producing PS2 games until 2012, and yet you're supposed to believe that Nintendo, current gen Nintendo consoles can't be supported. No, get out of here. You are delusional. It's a big cope and something that I've brought up a lot, but one of the things that is interesting about this, though, in regards to this, because more and more of these companies are switching over to Unreal Engine 5, which, of course, is an engine that can easily run on Nintendo Switch. A lot of these companies are switching over to Unreal Engine 5, and it's becoming more and more obvious that Nintendo is the only major publisher that still uses in-house engines for all of their major projects. There have been some deviations from that. Pikmin 4 runs on Unreal. Yoshi Crafted World runs on Unreal. I think there are like a couple of other examples. I think Princess Peach Showtime runs on Unreal as well, actually. They're probably doing this just to showcase that like Unreal Engine can run on Nintendo consoles with no issues, right? So like people who use the engine can't cope and say it's not possible. Like it is. Nintendo uses it themselves occasionally, but the really good in-house Nintendo engines are far better than anything else you see in the industry, right? Breath of the Wild has the best game engine out of any game ever, right? It's not even really deniable at this fact, like just the way the world looks, the way it runs, the physics engine, like all the things you can do, the way Link reacts when he gets hit, everything is just phenomenal, right? Everything just works in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, right? All the crazy stuff you can do completely seamlessly, and the games honestly don't get enough praise for that. But the thing that really should impress you is that this is all done entirely in Nintendo's special in-house engine. Nintendo made this all work, okay? And that really needs to be like acknowledged, but people really, really, really don't like admitting it because like it's so far cutting edge. It's so cutting edge and so far ahead of everyone else in the industry that people have like started making things up about it, right? Like the big one I've seen, and I addressed this on my community tab. There's a 4chan thread up about it right now. The claim is that it is not a Nintendo engine. It is actually the HAVOK engine, right? It's just HAVOK, bro. Like, never mind that no other HAVOK game does the things that Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom do. Like, it's just HAVOK, bro. Anybody could do this. We've been seeing this kind of engine, these kind of physics since Half-Life 1. They're nothing new or original. Please stop praising them. Please stop playing Zelda. Buy a gaming PC. It's a desperate attempt at like trying to prevent people from noticing that from a technological standpoint, Nintendo is far ahead of the rest of the industry. Instead of like making the horse balls drop and shrivel up depending on like the temperature, they're making like really organic, engaging fantasy worlds with their own unique like in-universe logic that makes perfect sense if you interact with it enough, right? It's so far above what everyone else is doing. There's really nothing even really close to comparable to it. Starfield came out last year, didn't even come close. Elden Ring didn't even come close. Baldur's Gate 3. People say Baldur's Gate 3 like beat out Tears of the Kingdom. Not true, by the way. Tears of the Kingdom far outstripped it in every meaningful capacity. Baldur's Gate 3 was actually competing with Breath of the Wild, right? Because Breath of the Wild set the standard, Tears of the Kingdom was a sequel to it, and Baldur's Gate 3 not only failed to compete with the sequel, it failed to outperform the iconic original, right? It was not able to do a fraction of the things that Breath of the Wild was capable of. There's a reason whenever you hear people talk about Baldur's Gate 3, it's always in regards to like my sex scenes, my romance, my party. Like it's never in context to like the actual game. Okay, like nobody actually knows what you do in Baldur's Gate 3. Okay, because it's just a basic RPG that's not interesting, not well put together. I don't know. Maybe it's better than what other devs have done, but the bar is so low that like I honestly don't even care if it's better than like Fallout 4 or whatever, because like I'm playing games better than that anyway. So it's like, to me, why exactly should I care about Baldur's Gate 3 when I can like make giant mechs in Tears of the Kingdom, when I can like fight guardians in Breath of the Wild, when you can like toy with the environment in such like unique, interesting ways, right? When you can get creative with how you take out like enemy camps or how you explore or what you do, right? Like again, nothing in Baldur's Gate 3 ever comes close to any of that, right? There are unscripted events in Breath of the Wild that are more interesting and memorable than the entire main quest line in Baldur's Gate 3, right? That's how big of a power gap we're talking here, right? Is that you can get into random boss encounters in Zelda that just have so much more going on than anything in Baldur's Gate 3. Again, nothing even comes close to what Zelda is doing. And the industry is really, really desperate for this not to be generally accepted, right? They're doing everything in their power to downplay it. They're screaming to the high heavens. They're trying to say that like Zelda plagiarized Ubisoft or whatever. It's just a cope. Okay, it is a gigantic cope. And I do really wonder just what the future of Zelda is going to hold. Because if this keeps up, I really don't think there's anything game journos can do to downplay Nintendo going forward. Because such a big cope, like ever since Twilight Princess came out, has been saying that Zelda's outdated, it's stale, it needs to get with the times. And now that it's not like stuck with the classic Ocarina of Time formula, now that it's evolved past that, like these people don't know how to cope. They don't know how to handle it, other than like screaming about how Baldur's Gate 3 won Game Awards and and how Elden Ring is so totally hardcore, right? Outside of like those really shallow reasoning, they really have nothing going for them. So they really have to like go to extreme lengths to try and downplay Zelda, try and downplay Nintendo as a whole. And I do think it's not working, right? So I do think this is going to be a major thing when it comes to the next Nintendo console. When we start seeing like things, new major Nintendo games, I think we're going to see like lots of really big upgrades to a lot of existing Nintendo franchises, right? I've been predicting like the collapse of the anti-Pokemon narrative for a long time. Pokemon is going to have like another renaissance period very soon, and there's not going to be anything you can do to stop it. Mario is due for a new 3D game. F-Zero is coming back. A new 3D Mario game could have lots of really cool, interesting ideas, right? Like it's going to be really, really difficult to like downplay all of these games the way you did in the 90s or whatever, right? You can't just scream at people about how those games are for kids, or that like back in 2002, like people were seriously trying to say that like Mario was a dead brand because it didn't have enough story. Like people were seriously trying to make these arguments about Zelda, like, oh, it needs voice acting, it can't compete. It was a big giant cope from everyone in regards to that. The Wii won that console generation, right? And the Switch won this generation. The Wii U and 3DS won their console generations. And I don't see any reason for the next Nintendo console not to do the same. If anything, I anticipate Nintendo will start cracking down on PC emulators. They're going to start cracking down on fan creators. They're going to start doing all this stuff that makes all this really prominent anti-Nintendo stuff just impractical. And I do think it kind of begins here, right? It does begin with people acknowledging that the things that the masses are saying about Nintendo games aren't true, right? It's not just this bit about the engine, right? This is just some autistic anecdote. The reality is every Nintendo game on every piece of Nintendo hardware is being wildly disrespected all the time. Every single day. And not enough people speak out against it. And I do anticipate that in the very near future, this is going to come to an end.